to this week's episode of The Smoke-Filled Room. I'm glad to be back with you. And as always, we have our political team from CORE. I'm Collin Corbett. Before I introduce the members of our team, though, John, I got to go to you. Apparently, I've been saying your last name wrong, and you were either too nice to tell me or you just thought it was funny to watch me screw it up. So tell me how to actually say your last name.
It is pronounced Gieske, and I just thought it was funny for you to mess it up, and my mom complained about it every Friday. So,
Gieske. So now you all know why we just call him John, because Gieske, that's just too hard to say. So we have with us anybody else's names I've been screwing up, or did I get all the rest of yours right? Chris, I try to screw yours up every week, but I seem to get it right.
No, you've gotten it right so far.
All right, so we got John Gieske. There you go, John's mom. Matthew DeRay, Abby Oliver, Michael Butler, and Chris Jacobiak with us from all throughout the state of Illinois. We're excited to be with you. We're all on location today from our various, looks like homes and home offices. I decided to change locations. I was getting a little bored with my downstairs office, so I'm upstairs at the kitchen table today. I am one step closer to just doing this out on the deck. So if Lane gives me permission, maybe in a future week, I'll be out there. And then I'll actually have a cigar while we do the smoke-filled room. I feel like this is something that I should be allowed to do. So we're going to work on that. Speaking of which, next week, we are going to be doing this on location once a month. We're going to be shooting our Long 9 studio smoke-filled room, actually in a smoke-filled room. And we'll be taking it to different locations throughout the state. Next week is in Lake County. We'll have a special guest with us. The Lake County Republican chairman will be joining to share his insights. So we've got a special week next week. We'll have a lot of Lake County discussion and, of course, Illinois discussion. The in-person events are open to people to attend. So if you want to contact us, if you'd like to attend one of our future recordings, please let us know, and we'll work out those details. And heck, maybe you'll even be able to participate. We're going to jump right into the agenda because, as usual, we have a ton going on, and we're not even in political season yet. There's a lot happening in Illinois. Probably the biggest news is in the Illinois 12th Congressional District. Mike Bost, the Republican, is the incumbent. He has officially announced his reelection plans, which is not a surprise to anyone. Michael, what's going on in the 12th? And give us the update on Bost, and then we'll talk about what else is going on there.
All right, sounds good. So yeah, like you said earlier this week, Congressman Bost officially announced that he was running for re-election. We saw him have a very strong fundraising quarter, the first quarter of this year, raising over $400,000, which is a strong showing, especially for a downstate congressional district. On his announcement, he kind of listed out some of his priorities for these next 2 years if the voters choose to send them back to Washington, D.C., and those include putting the American people first, holding China accountable, fighting for policies that support farmers, defending the Second Amendment, protecting the unborn and pro-life issues, and then also advocating for military veterans, considering he's the chair of the VA committee. So he really has a pulse on the issues that are important to the 12th, which is really good to see, and I think is going to put him in a strong position moving forward. So we'll see how things play out, but obviously we'll have even more fundraising numbers in a couple of weeks when that second quarter report comes out.
Yeah, for those who aren't aware, the second quarter for fundraising ends at the end of June, hence being called the second quarter. And those reports are out. Is it the 15th or the 21st of the month, Michael? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. That's a good question.
It's going to be the Monday after. It'll be the 15th if it falls on a Friday, but if it falls over the weekend, it'll be that Monday as when those reports will be due.
Yeah, and I'm going to look up the exact date. So by the time we're done with this conversation, we're able to give people the exact date of when that will be out. It is, it's the 15th, but then if it's on the weekend, it falls on the Monday. So what is July 15th? We should have had this information early. 15th is a Saturday, so it'll be the 17th. They could put it in early, but the July 17th is the deadline for that. So we'll certainly have a lot more information that we'll know when we look at Bost numbers on July 17th. We'll certainly be sure to share those on the smoke-filled room recording from that week. Before we get into why this race is such a big deal, anybody just have thoughts on Bost, his announcement, and him running for re-election?
Seems like the issues that he chose to focus on, as Michael was saying, they're very aligned with the district, but also they seem to be some pretty red meat issues, pretty conservative. It doesn't seem like he's trying to play to a moderate base. So it'll be interesting to see if someone does decide to challenge him, how they'll be able to go to the right of him, because I don't think that they would be able to pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's why. Let's talk about the 12th congressional district. I mean, Trump won it in 2020. Hopefully my math is right here. I've got it pulled up in our statistics, but it looks like Trump won it with 42.6%, or by 42.6%. We won it for the gubernatorial race, both in 18 and in 2022 by 20. I mean, Rauner even won it by 24 points. The progressive tax campaign went down in flames. We won that by 52 points in the district. I mean, it is a solid our district, one of the most in the whole state. So there's probably a reason why Bost isn't running to the middle. He's going to be running to the right in the race. But that leaves the question, is there room to his right in that race?
I think we're about to find that question out, judging from some of the maneuvers that are being made by a former Illinois gubernatorial candidate, especially in light of some recent developments in national politics. I don't know if we want to talk specifically on that right now, but this certainly isn't the old Illinois 12th congressional district. If you remember under the old maps and even the maps before that, the Illinois 12th congressional district was a swing district. And it really didn't get hard into the Republican hands until Trump came to office. You had the Metro East in there. You had some, former very ancestrally Democratic counties further down south that used to be part of Glenn Pochard's territory back in the day. So this isn't the old 12th congressional district anymore. This new 12th congressional district is if not the most conservative district in this state. And Mike Bost, who's always been a very conservative person, who's been able to appeal to a more moderate political voter back when it was a swing district, he's still, because of his votes and his ideology, is going to be able to play very well to a very conservative district. We saw how that's played out in our data from the 2022 election. So he's certainly been a very good campaigner up until this point. But now the question is whether or not it's going to hold up in the primary cycle coming up.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at challenging Mike Bost in that race, I look at the fact that he ran the second best race of any candidate for Congress in Illinois, both Democrat and Republican. The fact that he's raising a lot of money, that there's really no room to his right. And I start to wonder, what's the point? That gets us to the next thing here. So obviously the rumors have abounded that Darren Bailey would be challenging Mike Bost in this district. I know there were some rumors that Bailey may be announcing they do a big event with the 4th of July. Michael, you've heard otherwise. Do you have any word on what's going on with Bailey's plans to potentially challenge Bost in that district in the Republican primary?
I mean, obviously, if you follow his social media, you can see what he's been up to. I mean, he's been traveling the district. He was in New Jersey for Trump's speech following his second round of indictments earlier this week. So, he's trying to put himself in a position where ultimately, if he decides to pull the trigger and primary Congressman Bost, that he's going to be in a position to do that. But it's just, rumor and speculation to this point until Darren makes a decision and makes it official with an actual announcement.
I mean, we're at the point where everyone just assumes it's happening. It would be more of a surprise that he doesn't run than it would be a surprise that he does run, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like we talked about a little bit ago with the fundraising deadlines coming up and things like that, like it really wouldn't make sense for him to announce before that fundraising deadline, because you don't want to put that on paper that your first numbers are, $0 or whatever he is able to raise, over the course of the next couple of days, since that deadline is approaching so quickly. So I would guess that he's not going to announce until after the July 1. But
yeah, I mean, what you're describing is most smart candidates for Congress announce in January, April, July, or October, because you want to have 3 months to fundraise for that next quarterly reporting deadline, rather than just a few days. So he definitely wouldn't be smart to announce prior to July 1st.
I just think the whole concept of Bailey running against Mike Bost is really interesting. And for me, it goes back to the 2022 election. We saw with redistricting is that Mary Miller was drawn into Congressman Miller was drawn into Mike Bost's district, and she had the option to run against Mike in the 12th or against Rodney in what is now the 15th congressional district. And she ultimately chose to run against, Rodney Davis because, I don't know the exact details, but she chose to run against the more moderate member who ultimately got Trump's backing, in an endorsement, and Miller was able to be endorsed by Trump in that race. Like, if Mary Miller said, I'm not going to run against Mike Bost, Darren Bailey's cut from that same cloth as she is. What is Mike thinking here? Is this just, I want to stay relevant so I can keep up my political profile in Southern Illinois? To me, this just really doesn't make a lot of sense, because there's very little room to run to the right of Mike. Trump's endorsed him multiple times. He visited the district in 2018. That seems like a strong relationship. It's unlikely the former president comes out and endorses Bailey in this race, in my opinion.
And you see Darren Bailey's doing the typical Trump aligned candidate move when they want Trump's endorsement. He's showing up to Trump's speech in New Jersey. He's right in the front row. Hi, senpai, notice me, big man. I want your endorsement. Now, will he get it? Now, I like to believe he won't. But as we've seen with President Trump before, he isn't really the most loyal when it comes to these types of things. You upset him once, and he's going to throw you under the bridge. Do you remember how he did this with Jeff Sessions? Sessions famously was the first senator ever endorsed Trump. And when it came time for Jeff Sessions to run for the Senate again, Trump was throwing him under the bus. If Mike Bost, I think up until this point, is playing it very well, but with the way Trump has managed his endorsements in previous elections, I don't know if it's a guarantee that Bost gets an endorsement again. I hope for the sake of Mike Bost and President Trump's optics and within the Republican Party, he does hold firm on Mike Bost, but you never know with these things anymore, because politics is changing, and sometimes sitting in the front row of the speech is all you need. But it's also not worked for a lot of other Trump in line political candidates who show up to his rallies and try and get that photo op with him to hit the thumbs up. So you never know if it'll work for
the
Darren,
Michael Butler thumbs up.
Yes, no, you gotta have two
So
thumbs
it's the
up.
Butler move.
You gotta have two
There we
thumbs
go.
up.
I mean, listen, you'd have a better chance of predicting when Matt DeRay finally gets a haircut than you would who Trump is or isn't going to endorse.
And that's a good
Just
point,
like-
Collin. But I think Chris pointed out something that's important. Trump values loyalty. And up until this point, I don't think Congressman Bost has done anything to get on Trump's bad side.
Yeah,
In
but
fact,
Trump values loyalty, but Trump also has to be aligned with winners. I mean, we've seen it where he's been disloyal to people who've been loyal to him because he saw a chance to be aligned with a winner. I mean, at the end of the day, Trump's about his brand. And if Bailey is able to prove that's actually a situation where Trump could come out with a win, then maybe there's a chance Trump shows up. I mean, it's going to come down to that polling more than likely. But I mean, we didn't see Trump do much for him in Bailey's last race because the polling said Bailey was going to lose. I mean, let's be honest. It comes down to Trump is going to focus on Trump first. And so if Darren Bailey can make the case that an endorsement for him makes him look good, then he'll have a chance. Heck, if Bost can make the case that an endorsement for him makes Trump look good, then maybe Trump even goes that way, though that's less likely. I mean, it's just going to come down to what's best for Trump.
Well, I would say, Trump endorsed Mike 3 cycles in a row. He's been to the district twice. Like, they've continued to have a solid relationship. Obviously, Trump endorsed Bailey this last time in the governor's race, but there was reasons
But there's a difference between
behind
endorsing
that.
and actually showing up.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, he endorsed Mary Miller, and in the polling, up until Trump showed up in district, Rodney was actually still up in that race. I mean, Davis was up. It was slim, it was close, but Davis was up. If Trump shows up in district, the bottom falls out. I mean, there's one thing to say you endorse someone. It's another thing to come in and do a rally and raise money and get excitement for him. Those are two very different things.
I think it's actually more likely that he might show up and do a rally for whoever he endorses this cycle, just because he's on the ballot too. I mean, he's going to need to win the states of Illinois' delegates, and he needs to win the state of Illinois to be the next Republican nominee for president. I think it's more likely that he makes an endorsement in this race. It might be later on, once his people give him the polling and says, hey, look it, Mike's up by 12, you do this, she's up by about 25. So that's when I think that decision will be made, whether or not he's going to show up and show out for whoever he's going to be endorsing in this race.
Who were you in that scenario with the extra Chicago accent? I'm just curious who you were playing in that.
Sometimes it just comes
Mike's
out.
up by 12.
Sometimes it just I can't always maintain a very I can't maintain the camera facing voice at all times, Collin. Sometimes it just comes out of me, no?
Just the natural Chicagoan comes out.
Yes.
Yeah, I gotta be myself sometimes, you know?
You got
As
a
someone
piece
who's
of
marrying
Polish
a-
sausage stuck in the lining of your esophagus.
As someone who's marrying a South Sider, as soon as you cross the Cook County border, there's just something that changes in their whole demeanor and accent. So sometimes you just can't control it. So I don't blame Chris.
So let's keep talking about less so Trump and more, people trying to woo Trump. I mean, obviously he had, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, the indictment itself, but Trump had his big fundraiser in New Jersey. And as was said, there's Darren Bailey in the front row, making sure he's seen at that point. I mean, obviously there's some wooing going on. Also with him were some Bailey staffers who also have ties to Trump. That will certainly help Trump's case. Scott Casper, the co-owner of Illinois Review, was there. I saw Eloise Gerson, a Chicago Republican committee person who was there. There were a few others in the crowd. I mean, certainly there were certain people out there who not only wanted to be there, but of course be seen while being there. That seems newsworthy to me.
I was just gonna say shades of Scott Casper, but it looks like that's still Scott Casper's thing, is to just show up at Trump's fundraisers wherever he is, not just in Florida. So
I'm
I just find it
waiting for him to say he had a private meeting, because that's usually what follows. I had
oh
a
yeah,
private
and the
meeting with
photo too. And the
Yeah.
photo you can't forget.
Sure.
You know, Colin, what's interesting about this is I saw Caspar was with, what's his name? Brett Corrigan, that's his name, right? He had brought Brett Corrigan to the thing in New Jersey. Wasn't Corrigan suing Bailey at some point? Wasn't that in the news? Or am I
I mean,
making
it
that up?
all got resolved on a slow week. We can talk maybe more about details on that really weird situation, since that was never covered on a live SFR. But yeah, I believe that's all patched up.
Okay, I didn't know. Maybe Caspar might have been throwing shade at Bailey somehow. I didn't know. Maybe I could be wrong.
Yeah,
Which
I mean,
would be
obviously
hilarious.
that relationship soured a bit with Vargas and Casper and Bailey. I mean, they were wooing each other right after the primary, but then as the primary continued, suddenly it was they all started dumping on Bailey because they saw that Bailey wasn't going to win, so they started running away and then trying to claim that they weren't involved, so that they wouldn't be held responsible for the loss. So, as typical in politics, as soon as you see your candidate losing, you got to run and pretend like it wasn't your fault.
I find it fascinating that all these Illinois politicians are going to get Trump's approval when he's so. I mean, downstate it's a different story, right? But like, there's all these Chicago politicians trying to court the favor of Trump, who is incredibly unpopular in the suburbs. So
Not
I
in
find that
Republican
fascinating.
primaries, he's not. I mean, as much, you're right. In general
Yeah.
elections, Trump is a problem, but
Yeah.
in Republican primaries, he still polls exceedingly well. A little bit less so today than he did a few years ago. But the Trump endorsement is, for better or for worse, in a primary, still golden. Facts are facts, even when they're
I
inconvenient.
know it.
Especially when he's the presumptive nominee for president.
I know
this time
Chris is
around.
about to jump in there.
I'm changing topic before we get stuck on that again. Let's stick with Michael in the Illinois House District 88, which is currently held by Dan Calkins. He is not running again. He's kind of flirted back and forth with running or not running. Currently, the latest is that he's not running, and we do have a candidate and maybe another two, but let's talk about the first one in Regan Deering, who's announced. Michael, give us the word on that.
Yeah, so Regan Deering and that she ran for Congress in the 13th congressional district this last election cycle. She's announced this week that she is seeking the Republican nomination in House District 88. Like you said, Representative Dan Calkins has confirmed that he is not seeking re-election in 2024. And he was actually at one of the stops during Regan's kind of announcement tour, if you want to call it that. So it's going to be interesting to see. And this is a very safe Republican district, so it's going to come down to the primary. And there's some other folks that have kind of expressed interest or have been flirting with it. So we'll see how it all plays out and who all gets in.
Yeah, I mean, for some context, I'm going to give good and bad. So the good, I have to give Regan credit. It is very rare for somebody to run for Congress and then run for what would be considered a lower office. I mean, one of the challenges that we have is people get in politics, they get stars in their eyes, and they think there's somebody important. And when you run for Congress, usually that's a huge boost to the ego, even when you lose. And so getting someone like that to lower their sights to something more realistic, like state representative, is hard to do. So I want to make sure that I give Regan credit that she has shown, I guess, for lack of a better term, the humility to set her sights on a seat where she can win, she can make a difference. It's not beneath her. I want to give her credit for that. On the flip side, we have to talk about it. I mean, she underperformed by 4 points in her congressional run compared to the average Republican performance in the state of Illinois in 2022. So didn't necessarily run a great winning campaign there. It does seem like, according to local reports, she's pulled together a bit of a professional campaign there for this run, Michael. It sounds like that's what you're hearing as well. So the hope is she performs a bit better in this race, but some good and bad there. We always try to make sure we're balanced. Anything there, Michael, you might add to or dispute?
No, I mean, she's good at kind of the retail politics and working the room. I mean, I saw her throughout that 13th congressional race, and during the primary and during the general election. I think there's a lot of potential there, and obviously it's always nice to have another Republican woman in Springfield. I think the more of those we can get, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, and she's talented. There's no doubt about it. So certainly this is an opportunity for us to not waste potential and actually get them in a role. So this is good news for the party. And as you said, getting some additional voices, and she's younger. I mean, there's a lot of pluses here, but the primary hasn't even started yet. So we'll have to see where this race goes. Let's add one more dynamic to the 88th race, and then we'll open it up to discussion on everything. John, I know there's another candidate who it's been reported is looking at multiple races. One of those is the 88th, but he's also potentially looking at Congress, and that's Dan Brady. You want to give an update on what's going on there?
Yeah, so Dan put out a statement this week, saying that he's looking at possibly running in the 88th House District and in the 17th Congressional District. He hasn't made up his mind yet, but, if we'll talk about first with the 88th Congressional District, or 88th House District, Dan would be the favorite if he were to get in that race, in my opinion, for a few key reasons. First, 51% of that district is McLean County. It's his home base. He got well over 80% of the vote there when he ran in the Secretary of State primary. He's held elected office there for 20 years. That is his home base, in the district is McLean County district. Second, in a smaller state house race like this, retail politics is really important. And there is not a better retail politician in Illinois than Dan Brady. Dan Brady goes to an event, he shakes every hand in that room, has a conversation with every person there. He really understands the value of retail politics, especially in districts that are made up of these small towns. So in a race like this, that really plays into his strengths as a candidate. Regan might have more money in a type of race like this, but, Dan was outspent by hundreds of thousands of dollars in a Secretary of State primary, and it didn't matter because of his ability to be a retail politician and connect with voters on that really personal level. And that would play really well for him in a race like this.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Dan, as you said, has always been good at the retail politics, where sometimes he hasn't been as strong as maybe in fundraising, but in a smaller district like this, that becomes less of a priority. And we saw, Regan also struggled a bit with fundraising in her congressional race, and she has, supposedly she has means herself, but she didn't put those in her own race last time. So would she put it in this time? So it's no guarantee she would have a fundraising advantage. There's more to talk about with Dan Brady, but let's open it up. Thoughts on Brady, on Deering, that race specifically?
So to your point, Jonathan, something to watch in terms of retail politics. My understanding is that Dan Calkins actually was really encouraging Regan Deering to run for the seat. So maybe Dan's going to give her, his connections, some of his fundraising contacts, and that might give her that advantage that Brady has in that respect. So that might be something to watch, to see how involved Dan Calkins will be in this race.
Yeah, I saw that he was at her announcement, and it seems like he's pretty open that he's endorsing her, he's supporting her in this race. And by my understanding, he's a Eastern Bloc member in the state house. So that might give her some credibility with some very conservative people in that district, which would play to her advantage. But like John said, you will go with your guy, and Dan Brady is McLean County's guy. The Brady name in McLean County is it's him, the Brady. So that there's going to be if Brady runs for it, there's going to be a collision here. I think it's going to be a very interesting race, and I'd also be very interested to see where the House Republican organization goes, because they had played in some primaries last time in 2022. If this turns high profile, I'll be very interested to see if they go with the former incumbent or the Reagan Darren. Very interesting.
So Chris, actually, speaking with people involved in the House Republican organization, they kind of saw how 2022 played out in terms of getting involved in primaries. From what I've heard from, multiple people is that there's going to be a very hands-off approach in primaries. They really saw that backfired in 2022, and especially in a race like this, where it's a Republican district, they're just going to let it play out. And whoever wins that primary is, most likely going to be the new member there. And they're just not going to get in the way.
I'd imagine the bigger player there would be the Freedom Caucus, or as Chris called them, the Eastern Bloc, which is the more derogatory version of their name. But if Calkin's being a member there and they have a really solid presence in the House, they're going to want to continue to grow that. So I'd imagine they're going to want to play heavy in this and try to be kingmakers a little bit as well.
From what I've heard, though, there isn't really agreement on, who they're going to support in this primary yet, that it could end up being, a split decision. But we'll see how
Collins
it
has always
plays out.
been kind of on the periphery of the group. We saw this even before the gun lawsuits and all the challenges there. He was always a member, but not necessarily a core member. So the fact that Calkins is backing one of the candidates won't lock them in, but as was said, it could certainly be relevant.
Well, Calkins also has that connection to House Republicans for a while. I don't know if he still is, but at one point he was the treasurer and those kind of things. So there's a lot of dynamics at play here, obviously.
Yeah. Let's shift to the other half of the conversation. John, I know Brady, when he released that he's looking at different options, was talking about another race as well. You want to give us an update there?
So he's also looking at, the 17th congressional district, like his statement said. That's a very strong option for him in terms of, being a good candidate, in this type of electoral environment that we're probably going to be in. He outperformed Esther by 17,000 votes last cycle. He has a really strong name ID, like we talked about, that Bloomington Normal and over into that Peoria area, which is really helpful to, build up your name, just build up a base of support. The other thing is kind of like if he were to run for Congress, obviously the DCCC is going to go after him really hard. But when you're so well known and you have such positive name ID and a media market in that district, it makes it a little bit harder for those attacks to stick. Like, well, that's not the Dan we know. For the past 20 years, he's always been that guy who's there for us when, our family needed something, through his state representative office. The thing is like you said, Collin, it's fundraising hasn't always been his strong suit. It is a congressional race and a tier 1 that you're probably going to need to raise $2 million for. So, he would really have to step up that work in terms of the fundraising, and that's something that he's aware of. So, it'll just be interesting to see what decision he ultimately ends up making. But if he gets into the race for the 17th, he'd be a pretty strong competitor to run against Sorensen this cycle.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the data from the 2022 election, and you look at the statewide races, and he overperformed the average Republican in Illinois by 2.5 points. He was the highest performer on the Republican side statewide. He beat Bailey, he beat DeVore, he beat Demmer. There's certainly there's a name that works in politics. The Brady name has worked for a long time. And as you said, a retail politician, he gets out there. So there's certainly a lot there of potential. Sorensen is going to be the most vulnerable member of Congress on the Democratic side in Illinois. So the 17th is going to be a huge priority for Republicans. So there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on that race. Any thoughts on the 17th, or Dan looking at that race?
Yeah, the 17th is really when you look, considering 2024 and all the districts in the state, IL 17 is always going to be the prize pickup opportunity for the Republicans. It is the most swingy of the districts created that the Republican Party does not currently hold in this state. So they're going to be, if there's going to be pushing for any district this race, it's going to be the 17th. So if there's an opportunity there in terms of fundraising potential, there's an opportunity there in terms of picking up a seat, even with Trump on the ballot. That's a very rural, working class district. Trump's the reason that the old 17th was even in play for Republicans for so long, for those few cycles. So I think it's a very interesting opportunity. And if Brady makes a decision, it's going to be a good one, a good race, I think.
It's a blue collar district. It's a pro union district. It's a rural district. It's not a progressive district. So even with Trump on the ballot, if Trump's on the top of the ticket, that makes a lot of our districts in Illinois just no longer in play. Thankfully, the 17th would remain in play, even if Trump were the nominee. So this is a high priority for many reasons.
I like
All
you.
right, final thoughts, John?
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, Dan's background in the State House, he's done a lot of great work on manufacturing. So, that's going to give him a strong, ability to talk about things he's brought to the district and into the area. So that being a manufacturing district plays well into his hand.
Yeah, Rockford's one of the biggest manufacturing zip codes, not just in Illinois, but in the whole country. So, all right, let's shift to the 13th. Michael, briefly, I know the NRCC is trying to find somebody to run in the 13th. They don't want to give up on the district. Can you give us a quick update on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we already have Joshua Lloyd. He's announced that he's running, has been kind of working the district. John Milheiser has kind of expressed interest, but ultimately has not reached a decision on that yet. And NRCC, I heard from folks in Sangamon County that NRCC had been reaching out and talking to countywide elected officials and some county board members and things like that, and exploring options. They're not really making a commitment to allocate resources at this moment, but they're expressing interest and saying that ultimately, depending on who our nominee is for president and what the polling shows, that this may be a district that they get involved in. So there's they're keeping their options open and exploring potential candidates as we speak.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the 13th is Nikki Budzinski, the Democrat who holds that seat. She won in 2022 by 13 points. The baseline looks like it's a little bit more favorable than that, maybe more like a D8, D9, but of course it always depends on national politics. So this wouldn't be a high priority for the NRCC. Plus, DC just does not consider Illinois to be a priority in general. So this would be a tier 3 for them. But in a good year with a good candidate, you're going to get to make that race a heck of a lot closer. So it's not something that we should ignore. And if you look at the list of districts in the state that might potentially be in play, there's very few districts that would be higher on this list because there just aren't a lot for us to play in. So it's definitely not one to ignore. Anyone else have thoughts on the 13th?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting seat. A lot of that seat is Trump country, but Springfield Democrats, when they redrew it, took a lot of that Republican portion out. So it's definitely one of those seats where that part of the state's getting more and more red. And, Michael's doing a lot of great work in Southern Illinois, especially in that Metro East area to, boost Republicans. You get the right candidate in the right electoral environment. That's a seat that could be very competitive.
That's the district when you look at the 2022 remap. And you just look at it, what the Democrats did, and you go, chef's kiss. Because if you're a Democrat, that is a beautiful, how they were able to just take almost every major city in Western Illinois and just throw them all into this district and say, have fun, Republicans. They know what they're doing over there. They do.
Yeah, that was a very well-drawn district for Democrats. I mean, basically went from St. Louis to Champaign, and they created a Dem district, that's for sure. All right, let's keep moving. In Lake County, DeRay, haven't heard a lot from you, so I'm going to go over to you and wake you up. The Lake County State's Attorney has announced that he is running for re-election. He's a Democrat, and this is going to be one of the most watched races in all of Northern Illinois. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you say you want to wake me up, and I'm not the only one who's sleeping on the job. So is Eric Rinehart, as he was talking about in his re-election speech. And now he talked for a little bit, and he comes out of the gate and he talks about things that aren't really the job of a state's attorney. He makes sure he covers gun control and racial tension. He covers labor movements. I have no clue why he would do that, and economics, and also even abortion. But the one thing that he doesn't talk about, maybe he gives a couple seconds to it, but the one theme that he fails to mention is that his office has locked up criminals. And why is that? Well, it's because they haven't. The one job of the state's attorney is to be the prosecutor for the county. And his whole speech, his whole re-election, he didn't even say he was going to focus on it at all. And why would he? Because he hasn't done a good job with that. I mean, the state's attorney, he's the only, now that Kim Fox said she's not running again, is the only state's attorney in the entire state who supported the Safety Act. Of course, he doesn't mention that because it's really unpopular, but this is some guy who's repeatedly let out criminals that he should have locked up, and this is a prime pickup opportunity for 2024.
Yeah, the only state's attorney to defend and support Kim Foxx, the only state's attorney now at this point left who supported the Safety Act. Kim Foxx was the most vulnerable politician in pretty much all of the Chicagoland area, but she announced she wasn't running again, which was a pretty smart move on her part. That means all eyes are on Eric Rinehart in Lake County. He is vulnerable. The county is blue. Lake County has changed over the years. It's no longer red. It's no longer purple. So he starts the race with an advantage. He can lose by 5 or 10 points and still eke out a victory because the county is so blue. So he certainly starts with an advantage, but I don't know that the county is so blue for that kind of an agenda. Because remember, Kim Foxx underperformed Joe Biden last time around by 35 points. Eric Rinehart underperforms by half that, and he loses. So this is a high priority race for Republicans and conservatives in Northern Illinois. And as you said, we looked at that announcement speech where he reannounced, we read the whole thing. And if you're generous, 10% of it was about safety and actually doing the job of the prosecutor and prosecuting criminals. The other 90% was about stuff that really has nothing to do with the job. But that's what we saw out of Kim Foxx. That's what we've seen out of Eric Rinehart. It's about their political agenda. And we have no problem with that. You want to push a political agenda. If you believe in focusing on criminal rights, there is absolutely a space for that. And we need to do a better job in many, many areas. But that is not the job of the state's attorney. That's it. Plain and simple. You want to be the state's attorney, you're the prosecutor for the county. If you want to go and push your specific agenda, then just do it as not the state's attorney. That's the point here, is if you're in that office, you've got to do that job.
You know what I call him, Collin, actually? His name is Eric Rinehart. I call him Eric Crimeheart because crime is at the heart of everything that he seems to do in that office.
Where's our buddy Wiley? Because that's a pretty awful dad joke that I think he would enjoy.
Trademark it, copyright. We'll put that on the signs.
No one else is going to want it, Matt. You don't need to trademark it. It's all yours.
There will be two houses with the signs with that sign in the yard. It'll be DeRay's and it'll be Weiss.
No.
Yeah, and maybe DeRay's mom.
Well, if she lets them put it up. So the interesting thing about this race to me is it's coming from a completely different part of the world that is Southern Cook County, which to Lake County is like yin and yang. I think it's I don't think Eric Rinehart's taking a bad political maneuver here. You have to understand the people he's trying to appeal to. He's trying to appeal to that southeastern part of Lake County, the upper middle class, those upper middle class liberals, the city of Waukegan. Those are the areas that he's trying to appeal to right now in this speech. And those are the people who have turned Lake County from being a purple county to a deep blue county up until this point.
Yeah,
so,
the point is solid. I just clarify. I don't think it's Waukegan because we've seen, and we'll talk about Waukegan in a little bit, that Waukegan has actually started moving more right than left. But you're right. The southeastern portion of the county, the North Shore area, he's speaking to upper middle class voters. He's speaking to white guilt. I mean, there's a lot of things he's speaking to here that works very well in Lake County. So I get it. But to the average voter, if you get a strong candidate, just like Republicans had against Kim Foxx last time around, and you run a strong message and a strong campaign, you can work very well against that because the average voter, even though they may feel some interest in that message, at the end of the day, they care about keeping their families, their communities, and their neighborhoods safe. And a pro-criminal agenda just doesn't jive with that.
You get away with it if people can afford their own protection against crime, like the upper middle class and the upper class can.
Yeah, but that's not the majority of Lake County. The majority of Lake County isn't Highland Park. It's Grays Lake. It's Lake Villa. It's Wakanda. It's Lake Zurich. These are areas that, yes, they have voted blue in some cases. But if you look at how they vote on issues like the progressive tax, they voted overwhelmingly with the conservative position. So, yes, Lake County is blue, but people just assume because it's blue, it must be uber liberal. And yeah, that's the case in maybe Highland Park and Buffalo Grove. But there are many portions of Lake County that are liberal because they can't stand Trump, they can't stand Republicans today, but they are economically conservative, and on issues like crime, they are still fairly conservative. There's opportunities there for sure. So Matt, I know there's several candidates looking at it. We'll be talking about this race more in the coming weeks and months. I'm sure it will be a hot topic next week as we talk about Lake County with our in-person SFR. So we'll talk more about this race in the future. Let's stick with Matt quickly. We announced last week, we mentioned, it was already announced, that Jonathan Carroll, representative for the House District 57, had a primary challenger, Tracy Katz Muhl, or Muhl. We're not exactly sure how to say it, so we mean no disrespect if we said it wrong. It seems like, I'm just going to call her Tracy so I don't butcher her last name. It seems like Tracy is already getting significant momentum. You got a quick update on that, Matt?
Yeah, she had a campaign kickoff event. It seems like there was maybe about 70 people there, give or take. And the most surprising thing was how quickly she brought in some money. Now, she brought in the last quarter $121,000 so far. And I will call her actually Muhl, because when you look at all the people that are taking in the money, it's all her family just transferring it to her account. So all the people on there, they have the last name Katz, Muhl, or some other name, but the majority of it is just from her immediate family. So it's not like she's bringing in a lot of DC or Springfield donors.
That's interesting to note. I mean, I think everyone assumed when they saw those numbers, wow, she must be fundraising. Yes, it's notable if you're raising money from family, but it also doesn't necessarily count as much if you're not able to raise it from the community. So good first step. No candidate can win if they don't raise money from their family and friends. So awesome first step. We give her credit for that. Certainly there's going to be a barn burner of a race here. And as Republicans, it's nice to see Democrats beat each other up for once. But I think we're all waiting to see, does she expand beyond just her friends and family? But looks like in Lake County, there's going to be one of the hottest Democratic primaries in the state. And we'll be watching and enjoying. Someone bring the popcorn. All right, let's talk about two different referendums, and then we're going to talk change topics. So number one, the rumblings have come back up. Some may remember that there was a lot of talk about Democrats running a statewide constitutional amendment in the next election on abortion in an attempt to turn out their base. This is a strategy that Madigan used a lot. This is a strategy that Democrats have used even after Madigan, of putting referendums on the ballot to try to turn out certain portions of their base. And so they've been talking for a while about running a abortion amendment to the Constitution on the 2024 November election or November ballot. They haven't done it yet because if you pass it too early, then it has to go on the primary ballot, and that does them no good. They want to put it on the general election ballot. Though if it's constitutional, it may be required to be in the general election ballot. But either way, the talk on this has resurfaced. Anyone have any thoughts or insights on where that might be and where this might go?
You know, it'd be great if the Republicans weren't in a veto-proof super minority down in Springfield, because at this point they would have to push this through in veto session. I think even in general, they need more of a required vote to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot. But no, they don't need to worry about the Republicans in this anymore. And judging from how Democrats have been voting on abortion legislation since Mike Zaleski lost his primary, I don't see any Democrats bucking on this issue of putting this on the ballot. So if they want to put this on the ballot, I see this is inevitable going on the ballot.
Yeah, and they could vote on it next spring. It doesn't have to be voted on in 23 in order to make the 24 ballot. So they've got plenty of time. Anyone have thoughts on the strategy here? Is this going to make a big impact, a small impact?
Well, it makes perfect sense from Democrat perspective. I mean, in the previous election, one of the driving issues was abortion, and because of the Dobbs decision, and if that starts to fade away, or maybe we don't know if that's going to be the driving issue, now it's literally on the top of the ballot. This is literally the driving issue. So this is a way to keep the trend going, and I think that it's really smart play on their part.
Well, it's a little bit different than what they did last cycle with Amendment 1 and getting union support. I don't think there was really a coherent message that the opposition was able to put out to oppose that amendment. It's not that there isn't a coherent and good message that Republicans could put out against something like this. It's just that we either choose not to or don't know how to message this issue. And so we just kind of let the Democrats own the space. If we were able to have a solid message, I don't think it would be as successful as the Democrats are thinking.
Yeah, and this is one of the
a lot of it goes down to the exact wording of the amendment. Because despite politicians trying to portray this as a very black and white issue, you're either pro-choice, you're pro-life. That's not where the vast majority of voters fall. The vast majority of voters fall somewhere in the middle of that. And if this is written in a way where it allows for, abortion in very extreme circumstances, I think that opens up the ability for the Republican Party to point out just how extreme this is and just beat them to the message, and not say like, we're not against this necessarily, but like, this is just so extreme. This is more in line with, North Korea and China than it is with the rest of the developed world. So I think it really depends on the wording, and also the benefit that'll have across the state. I think it's going to be a very region by region thing. For example, the city of Rockford is a very, Catholic community. And in a race where you have a potentially vulnerable incumbent state representative, abortion isn't going to work as well as it will in maybe Naperville.
And this is one of the big flaws that's happened to the pro-life movement since the Dobbs decision. Because as a member, an open member of the pro-life cause and supporter of it, one of the issues was for years that the pro-lifers would always say that, we need to repeal Roe v. Wade. Repealing Roe v. Wade is the goal. The issue is now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, you're dealing with this, they don't know where to go from here. So when something like this comes on the ballot, where they're trying to enshrine the right to have an abortion, more than likely from conception until birth, because that's how Democrats operate these days. There's no infrastructure to push back against this, and it's all going to come back to the same pro-life talking points, which haven't really worked as we've seen in recent elections. So I think there needs to be a cohesive effort from a lot of different groups here to come together and find a message, if this happens, to come against it, because the last thing that needs to happen is to, keep pushing abortion in the state further and further down until, like Jonathan said, we're becoming more like North Korea and China than we are the civilized world.
Well, here's something to keep in mind. I don't know that abortion was necessarily as good of an issue for Democrats as they seem to think and as the assumption is based on our data, but that's fine. I'm going to grant that point. What I will say is this. This is not a state where abortion is at risk. They're going to try to paint it as your right to an abortion is at risk in Illinois, but nobody's going to believe that because it's one of the most pro-abortion states in the entire country. So it's going to be really hard to gin up their base on this issue. But where I do think this could be problematic for Republicans is with this on the ballot. Listen, if you're a Republican running for office, you can assume the first question you're going to get from the media is, are you pro-life or pro-choice? Because they know that trips us up. And they're trying to sell newspapers. So if they can get you to say something stupid, it's going to get clicks. So I get it. I get why they do it. That's one of the first questions they're going to ask. If this is on the ballot, if abortion's on the ballot, they're going to have a reason to ask every Republican candidate, where do you stand on abortion? And so if you're a Democrat, you know that Republicans really, really, really struggle with this issue. Putting it on the ballot puts every Republican in the position where they have to speak about this now in the next election. So I don't know that it necessarily changes turnout too much. It might a tiny bit. I think where this really has an impact is in making the Republicans look more extreme, because now you're going to have people who are going to speak out about abortion who don't know how to message it, who are going to take it too far, and of course make the rest of Republicans look like crazies. And so I do think from a tactical perspective, it's not necessarily a bad strategy.
I think the interesting thing, Collin, will to see, how a message of, I'm pro-life, but this isn't necessary. I mean, abortion's already protected in Illinois. How will a message like that, kind of play with the base of, we're not fighting against abortion, we're just fighting against this amendment because there's already legislation that has been passed in Springfield. Is that enough to appease that electorate, or are they going to make Republican candidates go one step farther?
It's going to all come down to how it's worded. I mean, I think that's our only saving grace here, is that when you look at Springfield and you see the fights between progressives and the more centrist and moderate members of their caucus, you do see a situation where a lot of this legislation, unless the unions stop it, a lot of this legislation goes further left than the average member of the public in Illinois. And that the pro-choice lobby is going to be pushing very hard for this, and they're going to want their own language in it. So if they get their own way, and this is too progressive for a state like Illinois that's more moderate, that's a saving grace for us, and this could actually be a good thing for us. And that's probably why they waffled, is people like Pritzker and others understand this is a risk. Not once it's on the ballot, it's what do you put on the ballot? Do you anger the pro-choice movement, your progressive base, by putting something a little bit more mainstream on the ballot, which would be a good tactical move for them? Or do you put something far left on the ballot, which might turn out a few people in your base, but now gives Republicans an opening to talk about how the Democrats are extreme? It's really going to come down to, as all things in politics, how you do this, not what you do, how you do. That is always the kicker in politics. And so I think this is going to come down to, as you guys said, it's going to come down to how it's worded. All right, one other quick thing on referendums, and that will be the end of our Illinois political updates. Matt, I hear there's a potential referendum on the ballot countywide up by you. What's going on there?
Yeah, this is to be determined of what exactly they're going to ask for and how it's going to look. But the Lake County Forest Preserve Board is going to be asking, or they want to ask for a grant from the people of Lake County. The last time they did this was in 2008, and they asked for $185 million, which is no small chunk of change. And what they're asking it for is just for continued land preservation and to improve access. And it'll be interesting to see how much they ask for, because last time the 185 million it was all earmarked to go to land acquisition, and now there's not much more land to buy. So it'll be interesting to see how much they ask and what they ask it for, and how political people line up on sides of this issue.
Yeah, what people don't realize is the reason why that last time was more successful is at that time Republicans led the county board, and in Lake County, the county board members are also the Lake Forest Preserve or Lake County Forest Preserve commissioners. And so you had a lot of Republicans out talking to conservatives about why they should vote for this, which neutralized opposition. This time around, the county is run by Democrats, the Forest Preserve's run by Democrats. There's nobody on the Republican side who's going to be backing this and getting the more fiscal conservatives to maybe neutralize or support this. So I don't think you're going to see the same dynamics and possibly not the same level of success as the last effort had.
Definitely.
All right, that's Illinois. I know you guys are always itching to talk about national politics. This is an Illinois political podcast, but we can't ignore national politics. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Let's talk about some national stuff. Obviously, there's a few things here in the presidential race. Trump was indicted again. Anybody have quick thoughts on that?
Just
Oliver, you're making a face. You go first.
Before I let Jonathan and Chris rant about Trump's indictment for 10 minutes, I would just like to clarify, I'm never the one who brings up the presidential topic. It is everyone else. So when you say you guys, that's
true.
Yes.
That's true. It is
Yes.
more John and Chris, sometimes
Yes.
Matt for his horrible choice in candidates.
Yes.
Then Butler for well, you're not as on the Trump train today. I don't want to out you. I mean, you're still probably a more supportive than maybe some of us, but you were Trump's biggest fan in Illinois last time around, weren't you?
Yeah, up there on the list, I would say. I just feel like with these indictments and stuff, like obviously, like Bill Clinton had classified documents in his sock drawer. Hillary Clinton had them in a server in her bathroom. Joe Biden had them spread out all over the entire country, in his garage and at University of Pennsylvania, like you name it, he had classified documents there. And obviously, none of those folks were really held accountable for that. Especially Hillary Clinton. That's like a famous political moment that we'll remember for the rest of for generations probably. So it's just, that's the way it is. Like people see this as like a continued persecution of Donald Trump because he's the only one seemingly that ever gets held accountable for anything. Everybody else just gets a pass,
Well, the problem is the way this has been done, really all they've done is strengthen Trump's support in his base. I mean, because as you said, it looks like he's being persecuted more than somebody else. We all agree that Hillary Clinton should have been gone after, but let's keep in mind, Trump was in the White House at that time. That could have happened, and it didn't. So it's a little bit Trump's fault that never happened. And yeah, people are going after Trump because a lot of people don't like Trump. But here's the problem. The guy, he's his own worst enemy. I mean, if he wasn't going around being proud of the fact and being cocky about the fact that he had these documents, that, he's flaunting the rules, he refused to give them back. I mean, it's almost as if tinfoil hat time that he wanted this to happen because Trump is a master of media and of marketing, and he knows that he could whip up his base with something like this. And wouldn't you know it, they had a fundraiser just when he got indicted. He gave a big speech. I mean, it all seems like he was goading them and they took the bait. So I don't really have a lot of sympathy because it seems like he kind of wanted this to happen.
I mean, Collin, $7 million is the number that he has raised since this indictment. It's been great for him politically. I mean, his army of small dollar donors, second time he gets indicted, they just all start donating because they think he's being persecuted, by the Democrats and his political rival. It's great messaging for your base. Unfortunately, you don't become president of the United States by just winning the Republican primary. You have to win a general election in November. And it just keeps getting worse. I mean, you've indicted him for the second time, and The New York one's more squirrely, but when you get into the details of this one of showing off military plans to people who don't have access, this isn't like Mike Pence or even Joe Biden where they gave the documents back. Like, national security was actually put at risk here. And, I don't know how much polling has been done since this indictment, but it just makes Trump that much more worse in the general election. This is going to be super unpopular with independent voters, but it keeps him going with the base. So we're just going to
listen. Tribalism in politics is alive and well. So the camps who hated Trump hate him even more now. The camps who love Trump love him even more now. I don't know that anybody's mind has been changed. I mean, you could basically have the 2024 November general election today. No one's going to change their minds. If it's Trump and Biden, everybody knows this moment right now how they're going to vote in the next November election. I mean, it's just, I don't even know, where do you find a swing voter at this point? I don't even know that they exist.
If you really want to put on your tinfoil hat, you could almost think that maybe the DOJ and the White House and the Democrats wanted this to happen. So then that way his base would get all riled up for the primary and all the other people would hate him for the general.
I mean, listen, this does increase his odds of winning the primary. So if that was the case, then kudos. It's not a bad play.
Let it rip, Chris.
Okay, so Darren, that's an excellent point. 'Cause that's where I was going to go with this, because now, like, I've been, you guys know, I've been saying this whole time. The committee to reelect the president is full force. Donald Trump's going to be the Republican nominee. But the thing is about Donald Trump is that Donald Trump has been in the news since 2023. We've been going at this for 8 years now. 8 years. And people are kind of getting sick of it. So yes, the Republican base are going to sweep Trump to the Republican nomination for president next year in Milwaukee. And all those independent-minded or suburban voters who are kind of on the fence in terms of political ideology, blah, 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 they're just sick of seeing Donald Trump's face on CNN or MSNBC or whatever stupid news publication these types of people listen to. They're sick of seeing it. So they're going to all go and vote for Biden or whoever will be the Democratic nominee at the time, just because the same reason these people voted for Biden in 2020, because they're sick of seeing Donald Trump on TV every day. Now, I must add, I've seen 2 polls since the indictment came out, and they had Donald Trump doing better than Ron DeSantis nationwide. They may be outliers, but if you're a plan truster, you think maybe Donald Trump would do better than Ron DeSantis. I don't know. Can't say for certain myself, but who knows? We'll see what happens. But it's going to be. I think I kind of agree with Ray's tinfoil hat conspiracy theory here.
I mean, so
Well,
Collin,
these people think they can we're just going to vote Trump out of office. He's going to go away. Like, obviously, he's been in the news 7 days a week, since the last election. So it's like, you might as well just vote for the guy, because you're going to see him on TV no matter what. And your bank account will be doing significantly better if he's in the White House. So just vote for him.
Your slogan is, you can't get rid of him, so you might as well vote for him. Is that your
Absolutely.
slogan?
He's going to be around whether you like it or not. So let's just put him in charge.
That's a good point, because if you elect him, you only got 4 more years to the guy. That's the thing. This people don't understand. You elect Donald Trump in 2020, you got 4 more years of him, and 2024, you're done. You never got to see him again. He endorses people here and there, but he's not president.
So you're saying 2024 to 2028 would be when we're done with him, right?
Correct. It could have been 2020 to 2024. We could have been done with him now, actually. He would just be.
He's not going away after he's in office. I mean, he'll be the first. Obama stuck around a little bit. Bush and some of the others kind of went away. That was always the sort of the gentleman's agreement that there's one president at a time. Trump's not going away. You make him president, you don't make him president. That doesn't change anything. Especially the media won't let it happen. I mean, let's be honest. He sells newspapers. He gets people to watch. He gets people to click. Whether it's conspiracy theory against conservatives and Republicans or not, I don't care. He makes them money, so they're not going to let him go away. They're going to keep going back to him over and over again until he's 345. There's just no way he's going away.
So we're in agreement. Let's just reelect the guy and.
There was a phrase going.
I can't.
Anywhere.
There's a phrase going along in political commentary. It's called the doom loop, and I believe, fellas, we might be caught in the doom loop.
Yeah, that or idiocracy, but that's another conversation.
MAGA hat stays on.
Oh,
And-
gosh.
Another candidate has joined the race. Let's talk about that. So Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, which by the way, his middle name's Xavier. And I just love that he goes by Francis X Suarez, because as a branding guy, that X just makes it, you can do so much with that. But anyways, we got another candidate in this race. Anybody want to tell me how many candidates does that make now? 11, 12, something like that?
Enough for Donald Trump to be the nominee.
12 and 4 serious ones, maybe. Like we're starting to get to the point where it's like, why are you running? Like, I mean, you're launching in June 15th, the first debates, in August, and you don't have a national donor profile to reach that $40,000 unique donor threshold. Like, it's just really interesting to think through like why some of these candidates are running. And I mean, I don't know if there's a lane for the guy. He's going to be pretty far to the left in the Republican primary. And even in today's electorate, I don't know what his lane's going to look like. And it's just really a confusing decision on my end, where maybe run for governor of Florida potentially after Ron DeSantis becomes the president of the United States. I mean, there's just going to be other options available.
Well,
Yeah, but that's the thing. Not everyone runs to become president. I mean, at this point, some of these candidates are running to be the VP choice. Suarez obviously can't be DeSantis's VP choice because they can't come from the same state. So at this point, Suarez could be running to be Trump's VP choice, though that would be surprising. Or as you said, I mean, he could be running to set up a profile so that if DeSantis is no longer governor, he could run for governor. I mean, it's not, you don't always run for office to win that office. There are plenty of other reasons why you might run for a specific office. And this gives you a chance to at least get out there and get known a little bit.
I mean, I saw an interview with a
Hold on, Michael.
congressman.
Oliver, go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's performing a similar role as Chris Christie is for Trump. Chris Christie's out there to kind of, I don't think he has a really path, but he's there to sit there and say Trump bad, Trump awful. And I think that's already what you see from Suarez. He's just saying DeSantis is mean, he's horrible. So I think that's kind of like, he's kind of in there as that attack dog against DeSantis.
Possible.
Yeah.
Maybe Collin's fantasy of Nikki Haley as the nominee comes true because Chris
Nope,
Christie
wrong.
and Francis Suarez just tear down the two front runners.
There you go, baby. I mean, listen, what I love is, let's just say how far the Republican Party has come. While the Democrats are running the oldest white guy you've ever met, Republicans have in the race 2 black males, 1 Latino male, 1 Indian American male, and Indian American female. Almost half this field are ethnic minorities. The Republican Party is making strides, and you see the field last time around, not when Trump ran for re-election, but in his first run in 2016, there was a significant influx of minorities in the Republican side who ran. This is a party who has rightfully so been branded the party of old white males, but in the last decade, that has significantly changed. I can tell you that as I train a lot of these weekends going across the country, most rooms are more of conservatives are more female than male. There's a lot of minorities in the room. I mean, we are finally actually making strides here, and you see it in this presidential field. And so if that's the only thing this accomplishes, listen, as a longtime Republican operative, that just makes me pretty happy. And by the way, I gotta give credit where credit is due. It was our buddy John Giocaris, one of my favorite political nerds out of Chicago, who alerted me to that information. So John, thanks for the info.
Really
I'll
telling
put
me to
my,
sign up for this discussion every week, Colin? This is a lot of fun.
I'll put the tinfoil hat on one more time.
Oh,
This would be elaborate
Wonderful.
Trump strategy. What if Trump tells Suarez to run so then he can take a bunch of votes away from DeSantis in Miami, and then he could say, look, you suck in one of your biggest cities that you supposedly flipped red, and you can't even win that. Just a thought.
It's possible, and you know what? Let's have fun with it. Politics is fun. Why not have fun with it? All right, we are getting late on time. So as usual, at this point, we got through half of our agenda. So we're going to run through just a couple quick things that are timely. But before we do that, well, we'll end with something fun. So I'm going to skip a couple of these topics. Abby, I'm sorry we missed you on DuPage County, but that won't be old news next week, so we'll cover that.
No
We got to
worries.
talk about the Chicago Bears, possibly now looking at Waukegan. We got a lawsuit filed against a sitting state representative that we'll talk about. Chris, your buddy James Weiss, we're recording this on Thursday. He was just found guilty, and he got 10 seconds of thoughts on that. We'll cover it more in depth next week, but you got a quick thought on that?
He's not my buddy, so number one, let's get that out of the way here first. And I'm glad that you're paying attention to that, because I can't have Twitter up on my screen right now. But he was found guilty. I mean, everyone's going to be found. I would be very surprised in the course of these trials who gets found not guilty. Right now, I think the strongest case of who could be found not guilty is either Burke or Madigan, just because their cases were kind of thin. But they're prolonging this, and the more people get found guilty beforehand, makes their chance of being found guilty pretty high right now. So I'll read I'll read more about it, but I think that's where it's at right now.
Yeah, we'll dive into it more in depth next week and talk about what it means. To be honest, from a layman's perspective, the case seemed a little bit weak, so I'm surprised to see that it was that strong of a guilty verdict. So you're right, this could mean some bad omens for some people whose trials are yet to happen. All right, I don't know if this is going to work. We haven't done the share screen feature yet, but I'm told by our tech guy Lane, well, he's not the tech guy, Abe is, but our guy Lane, who is on the back end here, that I can share my screen. So we're going to give this a shot here. You guys see what's on my screen here?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we got to end on something fun, because this week, former Governor Bruce Rauner had his portrait unveiled. He had some fun with it. Bruce was pretty laid back about it, joking, self-deprecating about his own hair. But I think many of us who've been involved in Illinois Republican politics are always very frustrated with the fact that the governor had to always be wearing a flannel shirt, dropping his G's. Well, if you can see this, if you're watching it on YouTube, if you're on Spotify, you might want to pop over to YouTube for this, but he wore cutoff cargos to his official portrait unveiling. And I don't know that I've ever seen anybody try to wear cutoff cargos with a suit jacket before. So I think this is a pretty classic look that I really desperately hope does not catch on in politics.
The choice.
So here's the big question. Now that his portrait's finally unveiled, do we ever have to see Bruce Rauner again? Or is he just going to screw off back to Florida where he belongs? Like, what's going to go on here? So I don't want to see this guy ever.
So the pro-union member of our team obviously has very strong thoughts about Bruce Rauner, though I don't know that any of the rest of us would deny having strong thoughts as well. But no, I mean, listen, every once in a while a member of the media calls him up and asks for an opinion, but I don't think anybody really pays attention at this point. Unfortunately, the Rauner effect is still there because Rauner staffers are still running all Illinois Republican politics. So he may be gone, but his influence is still very strongly here. And I know none of the rest of you want to get in trouble, so you'll all let me say that, and you'll quietly let on. But anybody here, I mean, we've seen political trends continue. Like it was Bob Dold and Mark Kirk who really pushed. What was it that the jacket, the cutoff jacket that a lot of politicians would wear? I know Rodney Davis picked that up. So I mean, you think that this could catch on? You think we're going to see politicians out there with cutoff cargos running for office?
Dear God, I hope not.
Well,
It'd be better if he unzipped them and then he just let him hang around his ankle.
Whoa. What's this about unzipping pants here, DeRay? What's going on, buddy? Pause.
Illinois has a history with that.
Pause.
All right, you need to put your tinfoil away. Tinfoil hat needs to go away.
He needs to put a lot of things away, and then he zips some things up.
So
I
does
don't think I had
Bruce.
seen pants like that since like maybe junior high or something. I don't know, maybe like fifth,
It's
sixth
not
grade.
a style that's out there anymore. I mean, I have, like, if you're out, like I've got hiking pants that I'll use like that. So if you're out, like when we were hiking in Iceland, it was great to be able to pull off the bottom half and cool off. But like that's hiking pants. It's not even like nobody wears cargos, let alone cut off cargos.
Yeah, the problem with those kind of pants, because I used to have those same pants for Boy Scouts, because you could
Of course
have
you
those.
did.
So the problem with those types of pants is if you take off the legs and then you wash them separately, the top will fade, but the bottom won't. So you'll have this kind of calico thing going on where you kind of got fading at the top and more pure, darker colors at the bottom. So bottom line, it's a fashion crime if you try and pull these off.
Chris Jacobiak.
So it's kind of like it's kind of like the mullet version of like pants. It's like business during the day and then party animal at night. You know, just unzip those things and you're ready to go.
You know what? Maybe
I
this
love
is the
when
way of the
Michael says
future.
that.
I mean, look, we went from mullets, and then you've got the COVID apparel where it's, you know, business up front, party in the bottom, because your cameras are only up here. So maybe it's just the next iteration of fashion. I think we need to have like a Chris's fashion corner on these recordings. Maybe once a month. Just
Really gonna
Chris
put my
gives fashion advice.
Really gonna put my metrosexuality to good use. Hey, Collin.
Hey, listen, it takes all types. We don't judge here.
Or you could just
It's
ask for
true.
one female on the team. I don't know. Seems like a good idea.
I think I have
Yeah,
better
well,
fashion.
I mean, You're more manly than most of the men on my team. So I mean, you know how to
I don't know
smoke
if that's a
cigars.
compliment
Most
to
of them
me or an
don't.
insult to
It's a,
them.
it's a compliment. You are you keep your own with the boys. You take them on easily. So
Oh,
you
man.
wouldn't be able to marry the South Sider that you're marrying if you weren't as tough as nails. So it was meant as a compliment.
Appreciate that. Get to work, fellas.
Atta girl, I like it. All right, we're over our time. As I said, we missed a lot of things on our topics, but unfortunately, it seems like every week that's going to be the case. But next week, as I said, we're going to be in person in Lake County. So let us know if you want to join. It should be an interesting shoot. And then we'll be back to shooting these remote the week after that. But there's Illinois politics never seems to sleep. So we've always got something to talk about. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. Thank you, you guys, to Course Political Team. I will try one final time to not screw up your names. Michael Butler, Chris Jacoviak, Abby Oliver, Matthew DeRay, John Gieske.
There you go.
I did it. John
Did it.
Gieske. I'm Collin.
Yay.
Thanks, everybody, for joining. We'll catch you again next week.